I'm delighted to be speaking with Toby Mildon, a renowned diversity and inclusion thought leader whose career has spanned organisations such as British Airways, Accenture, the BBC and Deloitte. Toby, thank you very much for joining me today.
You're very welcome.
We've talked a little bit about diversity of thought. It's often been said to be the new frontier of diversity. From your point of view, what does it even mean?
I mean, diversity of thought really is about recognising that, regardless of your background, that we all have very different thought processes, ways of viewing the world. That could be based on your upbringing. It could be because you are on the autism spectrum and just have a different way of interfacing with the world around you. And actually, it's about focusing on the benefits of that diversity of thought in terms of the impact that can have on businesses.
You touched on autism, for example. There's a lot of research being done on neurodiversity. I prefer sort of neuroatypical. Actually, I think it's a slightly better a way of approaching it. And CIPD did a recent study, and it said that the neurodiverse were the most innovative group out of all different employee groups that they'd reviewed, and also were very high up on professional ambition. Which seems to me to be what businesses of the future should be looking for: innovators who are ambitious and want to further their careers. Yeah.
Neurodiversity is an umbrella term, really, that includes the autism spectrum disorder, there are similar terms, so just autism spectrum condition, that kind of thing. But actually, neurodiversity also covers things like dyslexia as well, and dyspraxia, things like that.
And ADHD.
ADHD, yeah. So it's a family of sort of neurodiverse conditions. It's a spectrum, so there is, no one is ever really the same, and it's about getting the best out of everybody, regardless of where you fall on the spectrum, or if you're neurotypical, which means that you're not necessarily on the spectrum, but I think everybody is somewhere along the spectrum.
Absolutely, and I think obviously there's a difference between neurodiversity and diversity of thought, but I think it's a good starting point, really, because actually it explains how people think differently. Yeah. I've been reading a little bit about this, and I know we've talked a little bit about this. That there's been a development in neuroscience, so we can really start to understand or maybe classify what thought processes people have. Obviously, no two people are exactly the same, but actually, what kind of strengths that we have and behaviours.
Yeah, as you say, there's been tons of neuro research over the last few years. We know a lot more about it, but I think it's also about recognizing that everybody has diversity of thought, which can be influenced by your upbringing, situations that you find yourself in, that kind of thing. And I found it's actually a really useful topic to approach managers in business around diversity, because there does seem to be diversity fatigue, where we talk about traditional groups of diversity like ethnicity, gender, disability, LGBT, etc. And in my experience, when talking to managers, it's almost like they gloss over a bit. But when you talk about neurodiversity or diversity of thought, suddenly the penny drops. They understand, actually, I'm actually diverse in the way I think. This applies to me now, and then you can continue the conversation.
Yeah, I think it's a relatively new term for something that's been happening forever, and I think it particularly interesting in the makeup of teams. Making sure that you have teams of people who think differently, because, you know, we all want to get away from that idea of group think, you know, that sort of homogenous group of people who think the same, act the same, do the same, and therefore the outcomes are the same every
Absolutely.
time.
And it's been known for a long time now that diversity in business gets greater results. McKinsey have published some fantastic insights and research into that. And diversity of thought is just another way of viewing that diversity. So if you have a team of people working on a particular business problem, then you do really need diversity in that team. Diversity of thoughts just being, you know, one way of looking at that type of difference.
Absolutely. And I guess, like you said, you mentioned the McKinsey reports, and I've read them myself, and was it Delivering Through Diversity and Why Diversity Matters in particular. And you're absolutely right. There's a direct correlation between a diverse workforce and company performance. I think they said diverse workforces were 35% more likely to outperform versus their non-diverse competitors. I mean,
Absolutely.
that's a big number.
Yeah, there's huge commercial implications with diversity or lack of diversity in businesses.
Yes, listen, I absolutely agree. And you know, I think one of the interesting things about diversity of thought particularly is that as the future of work starts to change, where repetitive tasks start to be automated, and AI is obviously a big part of that as well, that the future of work may be around project-related work, where different people come together on a task or to solve a problem, and then dissipate after that challenge has been overcome.
Yeah.
And I guess building those teams with different thinkers is really key.
Yeah, and also just different ways of working. So, you know, the gig economy, tapping into the gig economy for your future workforce, using people remotely rather than expecting them to be sat in your office at, you know, regular hours of the week. People are just agile working. You know, people going into business now, particularly, you know, young people coming out of university, they really expect agile working as just the norm.
Absolutely.
And any organisation that can't provide agile working is going to have difficulty attracting and retaining that workforce.
Listen, I absolutely agree. I think, you know, we touched on earlier, you know, about the multi-generations that we have in the workplace now, 5 generations for the first time. And, you know, it's not about enforcing a new generation or a new way of working to work the old ways. It's actually we all learn from each other and create, you know, that future. I think one of the things that interests me a little bit about diversity of thought in particular is that it almost seems to wanting to create conflict in a work environment, doesn't it? And I think, you know, we're kind of instinctively, we shy away a little bit from conflict, but conflict is what they say, you know, what people are saying, and Deloitte did a fantastic report about diversity of thought, was that actually that conflict is really good, but the challenge is managing conflict.
Yeah, I think what people are afraid to talk about with diversity is that it can bring conflict. But like you say, I think it's about reframing and saying that conflict is a good thing if managed properly. You know, any team is bound to have conflicts, but if you have good managers managing and leading teams, if you can have a really good process of resolving conflicts, then that, you know, your business will be in a good place. But the benefits of having diversity of thought just far outweigh the conflicts that you're likely to experience on any team.
Oh, sure, and that's really interesting. And I guess, you know, what is healthy conflict? You know, when we take it as human beings, we naturally, like I said, shy away. But actually, if we make it a non-personal and it's very task-focused, you know, there's a lot to be said, you know, of the overconfidence of subject matter experts as well.
Yeah.
And because there's a lack of confidence, we naturally, well, this person's a subject matter expert, therefore what they say is gospel. And actually encouraging people from a different background to challenge that way of thinking actually creates interesting results.
Yeah, I mean, there's negative conflict where I would suggest that's really a kind of indicator of the culture of an organisation, and therefore an organisation should really tackle that culture if they really want to get ahead. But then there's also positive conflict when it's managed well, and that's where great ideas and innovations come from.
So Toby, we recognise that a diverse workforce, and particularly we're talking about diversity of thought, does that impact the way organisations are going to need to hire staff in the future?
Absolutely. I think in the traditional recruitment models, there's a tendency to take a job description and try and find somebody that matches the requirements of that job description and kind of carbon copy them onto it. But actually, there's a really powerful way of trying to look at diversity of thought. There's some really interesting tools coming online that allows recruiters and managers to look at somebody's sort of diversity of thought profile, if you like, and how well that can fit into a existing team profile, to see whether you're hiring somebody who's just like the rest of the team, in which you're going to get groupthink, or whether they really do have a different way of approaching work and can bring in innovative thought, thinking and things like that.
Brilliant. And so the traditional recruitment model, we touched on autism as an example earlier, and I think, if you are, you see the benefits of hiring people with that neurodiversity. For example, I know SAP, the German software company, actually are actively seeking out candidates with autism to spot patterns and make connections that perhaps neurotypical people aren't able to as easily notice. But if you put those people through someone who's got autism through a traditional recruitment process, they really at a massive disadvantage immediately.
That's right. And with autism, it's well known now that your typical recruitment processes don't really help people on the spectrum. A classic example of somebody who's autistic may struggle with social interaction. So your typical interview format would be difficult. And I've got first-hand experience of that myself, having worked with autistic people in the past. And actually what I have found is that if you modify and improve your recruitment process through the eyes of somebody who's on the autism spectrum, you actually make the whole experience better for everybody.
Absolutely. I think that's a challenge that organisations need to grasp. It is making that process inclusive and comfortable, and really focusing on what is actually the important elements. Is this person going to bring skills to the organisation that I wouldn't otherwise have, for example? Yeah. Do we do it on a skills basis or a thought basis or a task focused interview? Yeah. So it's a case of here's a task, let's see how you get on with it, and and we'll review those results and see how you match against what we're looking for.
Well, I've seen significant results in that area, actually. So typically you create a job description, which in my experience can run over 2 or 3 pages with several bullet points. And also those job descriptions have been created over years of copying and pasting documents, and people being too afraid to delete bullet points from those job descriptions. And most people will look at it and try and tick every box. We already know that there's a gender difference in terms of approaching job descriptions. Mm-hmm. Men are a lot more likely to apply for a job if they feel they can meet half of the requirements, and we know that women are more likely to apply the job if they reach 80, if they feel that they meet 80 or 90% of the requirements of the job description. But in my personal experience, actually, an exercise I did with managers in a previous role was I got them to hone in on the job description, isolate the one thing, the deal breaker item, that if a candidate didn't have this one thing, it's not worth calling them in for an interview, and then create a challenge around that one thing. So we did away with the job description. Brilliant. We just identified the one thing that this candidate needed for the job, and then asked them to demonstrate to us that they had that particular skill. Brilliant. And then the hiring manager was assessing them based on the quality of work that they produced. rather than kind of asking them how they would go about a particular problem.
And it's the piece of work and the skill they would need to do to complete the role.
Yeah.
It seems to make perfect sense, doesn't it? But I think we're a long way from that being an approach to all types of people, not diverse, non-diverse. I think actually making it skills based or behaviourally based. It's not about how well you present and you present in an interview or how well you articulate your experience, but it's actually about what skills, what strengths, what behaviours you have.
Yeah.
And I'm hopeful. I've started to see that actually with employers at all levels actually, that we are focusing on what someone is going to do, not what they've done in the past.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of work to be done around that.
Absolutely, yeah. And if we take it back to the diversity of thought as well, it's about embracing that and identifying how somebody's diversity of thought or different way of approaching a problem can benefit a team.
It strikes me when I go to certain companies and organisations and I meet people where the challenge is because they may be a successful organisation and they're comparing themselves very much to their competitors, not to best practice, for example. So the mindset is, well, we're doing well against our competitors, so therefore, why would I want to change my recruitment process? Yeah,
and actually, businesses need to think much more broadly than their direct competitors now. So, if you're an accountancy firm, you may want to think of yourself in a particular sector, but actually, I think most businesses will find that their competitors are growing. Take a financial company, for example. So many fintech companies are coming on board now that are demanding skills that you're now, as a business, having to fight and scramble over. So your competitor base is getting so much bigger. So companies have to up their game. They can't just look to their direct competitors because their competitors are so diverse now.
Sure, and I guess when they discover they've been overtaken, it's too late by that point. You can't really make up lost time in approaching that recruitment, that talent attraction, if you like. If you wait too long, the opportunity is lost, and there are plenty of examples of big businesses that have fallen by the wayside by not thinking ahead. It often strikes me when you see leaders who want control, not influence. This is the way we do things around here.
Yeah.
Or their focus is on what's disrupting us from doing our job, as opposed to what could we do better.
Yeah.
And I think organisations are starting to get the message. Certainly a lot of organisations have. And some industries, you mentioned the fintech industry, for example, are certainly striving ahead, but other industries been doing quite a lot of work in insurance recently, and that is quite an old-fashioned industry. And there are some people who really see the opportunity of moving forward, but as an industry, that change is slow to come.
Yeah. There are industries that are really embracing diversity and completely get it and understand it and running with it, and there are industries that are still behind.
Absolutely. So there's an opportunity for those companies. Toby, that's really insightful. I've really enjoyed having this conversation about diversity of thought. I think the conversation is just really starting at the moment. I think there's a long way to go. I hope that if we can grab one positive or one opportunity, if you like, it would be in redesigning how we attract talent and how we engage with that talent in the workforce. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's throughout the whole life cycle, really embracing diversity of thought at all levels. So how you attract people to your business, how you get them into your business through the recruitment process, and then how you keep them and grow them within your business as well.
And what challenges do you sort of see with, I guess that's the inclusion part, isn't it? What challenges do you see when you've successfully hired somebody who thinks differently? You've got this, real innovator or someone with creative thinking, but they're coming into an organisation that is maybe not ready to change. Maybe the human resources or the recruiting teams or senior management are very focused, but perhaps the middle management, area where they're time pressed, they have they're task focused. What sort of challenges have you seen happening there?
The biggest challenge is around culture, and this has to be driven from the top of an organisation. So you can attract diversity of thought into your business, but if somebody spends a month with you and they feel that they don't belong there and they don't fit in, or their difference isn't valued, they're just going to leave. Or worst case scenario, they'll stay with you, but they'll just be completely disengaged.
Which is pointless and actually very costly for businesses.
It's very costly.
The cost of rehiring staff is very high, but having somebody who's disengaged is probably even higher.
And it just doesn't help towards a positive culture.
Absolutely. I guess it impacts everybody else around them as well.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Toby, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed that.